Okay, I've had a question about why an SL-5 might be finishing before the record's actually finished. And look, this is a problem that I had, and I suspect that this might be the similar problem to this, this person might be having as well. So, if you look here, you've got, this is basically a rest for the tone arm, and there's a little groove in here. And what this does is this sort of catches on the tone arm at some point and, gives it its like start position and whatnot. Now, the tone arm is connected to this whole thing, and there's, it's bushed in here. Now, what I suspect is happening is that originally mine was cracked along here, and I had to epoxy it back in. Now, I'm still having a slight issue in that it's still a little bit premature when it finishes, and I suspect that means that this needs to be flush, and I shouldn't be seeing any metal there. So what I think is happening, well, I'll explain actually how this works is probably the better option, and then you can sort of figure it out from there. So when the record plays, there's actually a sled that's operated that, has the whole tone arm control, and what it does is it'll move this about 5mm, and the tone arm will then, play, and on the tone arm there's a tab sort of that pokes into an optosensor once it gets to a certain point, and then that triggers the motor to move it again for about 5mm again, and then the tone arm just sort of free plays and just goes and goes and goes, and then like that. So it just keeps doing that until basically the end. Now, if there's too much gap here, too much play, which there would be if this was, cracked and loose, and then this thing is actually poking all the way out here. Basically what's going to happen is the whole sled mechanism is going to hit the stop switch at the other end, and it's going to say, stop playing please, and, the unit's going to shut down, all while the tone arm has still got, maybe it doesn't look like a lot, but, it could be like 3 to 5mm left to play, and on a record that's, maybe a minute. So I suspect that that's what's happening. Now, I've still got a problem. This is shutting down just a little bit too early. I'm going to have to try and heat this epoxy up to soften it so that I can push it in a little bit further and then see if that fixes my issue. The next problem that I have is to do with the drop here. As you can see, this moves very, very freely, and what that translates to is the tone arm will come down when you press start and it'll just bounce. And I don't think that's good for the needle, so it needs some sort of friction modifier on this brass bearing, bush, whatever it is. So, what do I have for that? A few people suggested Tamiya silicon diff oil, which with a nice high viscosity, so I bought some, what is it, 100,000 or something. It's quite thick. Is that going to do the job? I don't know. I suspect that it's going to sort of leak out of the bearing, so I bought also these friction damper greases. There's a hard and a medium. So they weren't so expensive, so I thought, well, I can try all of these and just see which one I think is the one to use. And, there's other things that these can be used for, sometimes for the tape door mechanisms and things like that. To slow them down, they use a thick silicon type grease as well. So all of these have use, beyond this one turntable. So we'll have a look at that and see what happens. So anyway, that's probably going to be tomorrow's job, and there'll be an update then. Alright, so to get this a little bit further in to where I think it should be, what we're going to do is just dip it in some hot water here for a bit, and see if we can't get that epoxy just to sort of soften up a bit. So we might pause this because this is going to be boring. Okay, that didn't take long at all, and that's gone very soft. In fact, I wonder if it didn't loosen too much. Anyway, I'm going to put that kind of flush, I think, this time, because that was relatively easy to do, and we'll just let it cool down and see whether or not that holds. Okay, well the answer is that that didn't retake, it didn't re-solidify and sort of grip. So I've had to clean that up, and that was a bit of an ordeal. Various solvents and a bit of fire was involved. Anyway, I've got it cleaned up, and that'll be re-epoxied back in. But I think I'm going to worry about that tomorrow now. I've sort of had enough of that. So anyway, there you go. There's the bits. And as you can see, this plastic's still got the crack in it, the original crack. So anyway, once that's epoxied in, that should basically hold it all together and give it the strength that it's sort of lacking. It doesn't really bond to this very well, but it sort of sits in there enough, and there's actually not a huge amount of force on that, so it should be okay. Basically, I think that cracking there, or that split, is just really the plastic is just sort of shrunk around the metal there, and the metal doesn't shrink obviously with age, but this plastic does. So I think just epoxying that back in will be good enough, and that's why I did it in the first place. So anyway, this time I'm going to mount it in flush. I think that's probably the better way to go, and should hopefully cause me less trouble.